The company commander looked at my record of combat hours for 12 air medals, 1 air medal for valor, and various recommendations, and decided that instead of court-martialing me, that he was giving me a 5-day leave in country in a place called Vung along the South China Sea coast to work my sorrow out. He told me it was under the guise of a TDY, temporary duty pass, and to just get drunk or whatever. I thanked him for his leniency and jumped on a helicopter the next day that was headed that way. I took my 45 and some MPC with me. I learned from the crew chief on the helicopter that Vung was a very nice place, an R&R center, rest and recuperation, for both the VC and us. I wondered about how that could be. He said that everyone just minds their own business. I figured that's how it should have been in the first place. Thus both sides could have avoided all this killing. I arrived in Vung and went to the army barracks where I was to show someone my TDY pass and sign in, which I did. I was then told by my company commander once I did that to keep my pass with me and I was free to ramble as I wished and to get a hotel room or whatever. I paid for a hotel room which consisted of a concrete room with a concrete bed with some straw and a blanket on it, 1 small window and a door. I probably was charged way too much but didn't care. Next, I went looking for the seacoast, which I knew would put me into a dreamy state of mind. It always did. I found the South China Seacoast 1 block from my hotel room. I had no luggage, so I just headed toward the seacoast and started walking on a small dirt road that followed the coast. It was very beautiful along the coast, with land going up into some foliage on the other side of the road with very nice adobe houses and temples looking over the sea. Along the water's edge, many Vietnamese women were mending and making filament fishing nets. I smiled and waved to them, but they mostly ignored me. They were probably mostly VC sympathizers, I would think. Don't get friendly with an American soldier, the older women probably instructed the younger women. Chinese fishing junks were just offshore fishing or hauling goods, just like the ones I saw pictures of in the library back home when I was a kid dreaming of faraway places. Well, I'm definitely in a faraway place right now. The whole coastline I walked was peaceful and beautiful in the extreme, just like in a dream. Even the sea was calm and glistening with sunshine sparkles. After a few miles, I came upon what seemed like maybe an adobe temple turned into a restaurant with a veranda overlooking the sea. I walked up the slope and sat down at a table that overlooked the sea. No one else was in or around the adobe structure, except a French fellow that owned the place, and an elderly Vietnamese couple that lived or worked there. I explained that I wanted to be left alone and ordered a bottle of French liquor and a pitcher of water. This they brought to me as I showed that I had MPC and then let me alone to my thoughts. I think they brought me some oysters that they said I would like. I thanked them. I think I had not eaten in at least 3 days. I sat there looking at the peaceful sea, drinking alcohol and water. Me, who doesn't even drink. I did this for hours. They must have watered down the liquor, for I could not get drunk. Just as well, as I finally decided to walk the coast road back to town as the beautiful sunset was in full bloom. I was the only one on the road. How blissful. I arrived in town as the day turned to night. I decided just to go up to my room and sleep on my concrete bed with straw on it. That was it for me until daylight the next morning. I awoke the next morning and decided I would do more walking around town and maybe try some food from somewhere. I walked to some private places in town that served a hamburger and French fries. I stopped at one and tried eating. I did manage to get some food down with a cold Coke, but not much as I was used to not eating much. There were all sorts of steam bath places and what were obvious low-grade whorehouses with sheets thrown up as walls between rooms. It disgusted me, and I would never partake in such crude sex. Wait in line, pay money, do your thing, and move on. When one walked out of the GI attraction district of town, things became pleasant. Kids going to school and local grocery stores doing their daily business. A real village. It was very nice to see and experience, and I took a lot of pictures with my Canon QL 1935 mm camera, mostly of scenery. as Vung Tau was a very beautiful place. I did a lot of walking. In fact, I walked around the whole day smiling and waving at the Vietnamese people. Some even smiled and waved back. Just being out of the war for a couple of days was calming my emotions down. Things happen, and especially in war, and I know Ray would not like to see me so miserable over his death. I was planning on my own death as a crew chief, but I guess I figured my close friends would not be killed. I don't know what I thought after a while, but Ray's death really sent me emotionally and mentally in a tailspin. But this trip to Vung Tau was really healing my mind. It was the first time in 7 months that I had been out of the shooting and being shot at war for a few days. It was great to be in a peaceful and pretty setting for a change. Well, I was in deep thought as I walked around the town, just watching normal life and taking a few pictures. This went on for 4 days and some nights. I liked walking and sitting along the seacoast a whole lot. So mellow was the surf lapping at the shore, and the smell of the sea was so refreshing.
My last day I was walking along the seacoast when I saw 2 Korean soldiers keep dunking a Vietnamese kid underwater, nearly drowning him. I told them to stop as I drew my .45 out from under my jungle fatigue shirt. They quickly obeyed me and ran away. The kid thanked me. His gig was selling shelled peanuts rolled up in newspaper. He was about 10 and already spoke Vietnamese, French, and English. I found that the Vietnamese were a very intelligent people. I bought all of his peanuts and gave him some money. We then walked to a bar that was sort of out of the way that his aunt owned. He introduced me to the people in there, all Vietnamese. I was the only American. I think he told me what I had done for him, as they were very friendly toward me. I think there was 1 fellow in there and about 5 women, mostly young. One asked what I wanted to eat or drink and what kind of music I liked. She also asked if I liked to smoke pot. I said I would like to smoke some pot, drink a cold Coke, and listen to Beatles music. One of the pretty girls, they were all pretty, came up to me, brought my cold Coke, sat next to me and lit up a rolled marijuana cigarette while the Beatles music started. We shared a couple of hits of the pot, and I was on a different planet, enjoying my cold Coke and listening to the Beatles music and sitting next to the most exotic and the most beautiful woman in the world. Of course, I fell in love immediately with Vietnam, Vung Tau, the peaceful tavern, and the beautiful girl. Peace and beauty is what I needed. That's all anyone needs. I found by accident what I was looking for. Myself and Nguyen had a very long, earthy, and inspirational talk. She and I got along perfectly. She had a 1-year-old son who would never see his father. He was killed in the present war. I forgot whether he was VC or not, but I do remember thinking, what if I was the one who killed her husband and the father of her son? It was possible. How terrible and foolish this war was. Everyone on both sides who were trying to kill each other had extensive families back where they called home. Nguyen asked me if I wanted to go to her village and sleep overnight with her. I said yes. It would be the first woman that I ever slept with. So we left the restaurant tavern and had a Vietnamese driver of a horse and cart take us on our way. The driver sat on a board up front, and we 2 friends sat in the 2-person carriage behind him. We were on the dirt road next to the sea. The sun was going down into the sea very peacefully and colorfully. I had a good feeling come over me and asked Nguyen to ask the driver to stop, which he did. I got out with Nguyen and stood next to the sea and took off my gun belt, .45 caliber automatic, and 3 clips of ammo, and threw them far into the sea. I was tired of the war and wanted to be done with it all. We got back into our moving carriage and headed once again to Nguyen's village. The village was a pretty long ride from Vung Tau.
We entered Nguyen's village at night and went to her hooch, which was adobe of some sort. It was big and only 1 room. She had a 1-year-old son that her mother was taking care of. We sat on the floor and talked for a little while. Then 3 elderly Vietnamese men entered the hooch and sat on the floor. Nguyen and they talked to each other in Vietnamese for a little while. Then one of them, who spoke English very well, began speaking and asked if I would like to talk with them for a while. I said sure that I had nothing to hide. We had primarily a philosophical discussion on the need for an armed conflict in Vietnam. They indicated that 90% of the Vietnamese people wanted a unified country of some sort. That what was going on was a civil war. I said that I could understand that, as we had a civil war in the United States in the years 1861 to 1865. I guess the older fellows, when they were talking and interpreting among themselves, understood that I was not a complete moron, but was somewhat educated. They asked simple questions like where I was from in the United States and how I wound up in the army in Vietnam and why is baseball so popular. We had a nice simple discussion, and I told them how beautiful I thought Vietnam was, and it was a shame that so many people were fighting here. I think Nguyen filled them in on why I was in Vung Tau and what I was doing here. The old fellows and I shook hands in a friendly manner, and they left. Then Nguyen and I went to bed under mosquito netting. It was a very peaceful and pleasant night. The next morning I awoke and said my goodbyes and walked out of the village along the dirt road heading to Vung Tau. I think I walked about a mile and ran into an armored American patrol. I waved my arms so that they wouldn't shoot me, as they looked dangerous. A tank and APCs and a jeep. A captain zoomed up in a jeep and asked what the heck I was doing out here. I said it was obvious that I was walking down the road. He thought I was a deserter. I gave him my TDY orders, and he let me go by saying it was a good thing that I didn't get close to the village down the road, as it is a VC village. Oh, I said. Well, I walked a long way down the road to Vung Tau. I liked walking, but certainly not enough to be in the infantry. I did a lot of thinking these days in Vung Tau. Now it was time to catch a ride back to Pu Loi and the 128th AHC. I still have 5 months to spend in Vietnam. How could I spend it? I'm a good crew chief and gunner. That is what I know best. If someone not as good as I take my place, that helicopter and crew would possibly be in jeopardy. Not that I was irreplaceable, but I'm here. It was the same sort of thinking that had me volunteering for combat crew chief in the first place. Do I care if I'm killed? Yes. But I am not afraid of death at this point, as I have gotten used to the idea of dying here. When Ray was killed, I was in a major non-thought breakdown. Now I was thinking again. I needed that peaceful break from the combat and violence that I was experiencing as a daily diet. I miss Nguyen. Life can be very peaceful and beautiful. I guess I forgot about that. Nguyen brought me back to my senses, although maybe not completely, as I was up flying combat again. Everyone welcomed me back, and I was surprised at how a 5-day reprieve from the shooting war restored my sense of duty to my fellow combat aviators, and not only mine focusing on my personal loss.